Welcome to the Muse Table. I'm here with Paris Mwendwa. How are you doing?
I am so good. How are you?
Good. I'm so excited to have this conversation. You have been on my list of dream guests, so I'm excited to do our conversation and get to know you a little bit more. I'm sure like a lot of my viewers have seen you on their For You page or on their Substack algorithm. So getting to hear behind the words and the voice on TikTok will be very exciting for people. So before we get started, I want to allow you to introduce yourself and let us know a little bit about your work.
Well, thank you so much, Janice. First of all, thank you so much for having me and inviting me on here. I'm so happy to be here. I'm Paris Mwendwa. I am 20 years old. I'm in Southern California. I'm an essayist, primarily talking about feminism and womanhood and incorporating, as of late, more general narrative nonfiction stuff onto my Substack. I kind of think about myself. I was trying to figure out how I wanted to articulate this, but like. I find a lot of identification and a lot of beauty and kind of just thinking about myself as like just the archetype of a 20-something woman as a girl going into a woman. Like I find a lot of refuge in being like very basic and very simple and very like, just kind of like that archetype of like what do we think of when we think of just like the every woman, I guess. And I think it's because so much of what I write and what I pride myself on being able to do is like translate the experiences that we have as women that are very universal into writing. So I think like being able to like not fall for the programming I think a lot of us are very tempted to go for, of like trying to cosplay some level of like individuality and originality, and I'm so different, I'm not like other girls, I'm gonna like separate myself from the crowd, but actually being like the crowd is where we find safety, and I love being a member of the crowd. So I think when I'm like I need to find a more succinct way of like explaining that to people, but being like I am a Paris, I'm a writer, and I just write about like what we're all thinking and feeling.
Yeah, I get that. I can relate to that a lot, where I feel like I'm trying to, I don't know, because I have a PR background, so I think of everything from a little bit of a PR lens, unfortunately. So I'm like, okay, like how do I market myself? Like, how do I box myself in? And I'm like, I don't know how to do that. Like, I'm just me. Like, I write, I make TikToks. I exist as a woman in her 20s that's figuring stuff out. So like trying to find and put yourself in like an archetype almost. I feel like, especially with TikTok, I think it's people like that because it's easy to conceptualize, especially in like the Carrie Bradshaws of the world. It's so easy to put yourself in that box. But I think as you're saying, individuality is so important, but also like it's okay to just be like every other girl. Like that is being honest.
No, I mean, I think like as women, there is such a big push for us to be able to where we are so categorized already, like you are a slut or you're a virgin or you're a housewife or you're a Carrie Bradshaw or you're a basic Brandy Melville girl or you're a vegan hippie, whatever. Like there's so many different boxes for us to put ourselves in, and I think we're so tempted to get into that so that we can be digestible and palatable, which are like traits that we're taught are very important. So I think that like it's an interesting line to walk, in that I think the boxes are a sign of our oppression, but I also think that when I think about the boxes, then it's almost like broadening them up and being like, it's not just about, I guess, being a SoCal, I'm a California girl, or I am a 20 something SZA stan, or I'm whatever thing that I am. I am just a girl. And like we can all find this sort of, or a woman, and we can all just kind of find that there is this through line there that I think we sometimes struggle to articulate and to be able to identify. But I think through taking on that identity and like understanding that what that is, then it gives us the space to be more honest about it, which is ultimately way more liberating, I think.
Absolutely. I love all of that. Going back to your Substack and TikTok, like you are growing really a strong community on both platforms. How do you see both your Substack and TikTok kind of connecting to each other?
I started on TikTok to promote my Substack. That was the goal, the end goal. So and to this day, I think at my core, I'm a writer. So I'm like, whatever I can do to get back to the writing is like, if I'm doing anything that's not the writing, it's to get it back to the writing. So I think that's what I initially, where my relationship with TikTok began. I mean, I was a user before then, but like when I started posting. And I think that like Substack is such a beautiful platform, and being able to center writing and center writers and like that creative expression. But then we're also like in a culture right now where people hate reading and they hate
Yeah.
they hate anything that cannot be consumed in 15 seconds. So I think it's a necessary evil that we kind of have to go to these places where we can like just put whatever you need to say in a 10-second long video and make it aesthetic and make it fun and put the audio and whatever. And I try to just kind of like bait people in with that content. But I was reflecting on it that I think that TikTok is not try not to demonize it entirely, because I think that the problem, if I guess we can call it that, with something like Substack is that there is a longer turnaround time, and that like I post 6 essays a month, including my paid essays. So I'm spending like about a week on each piece. So it's slower ultimately in the grand scheme of things. I'm posting like 10 times that amount on TikTok in a month. So there is an ability, I think, to like not get so attached. I think it's really taught me non-attachment a lot, like being on TikTok, to be like, what's just one video and I'll just put it out and I don't need to be so worried about, every little thing the way that I might on Substack. So I think that they complement each other in that way, where then like I approach a lot of my essays with a lot of intentionality, so I can bring maybe some of that to the TikTok, and then but also have a lot of that like casualness and being able to like play around with like different archetypes and music and be able to like express these different parts of myself on TikTok that I can bring to Substack as well. But ultimately, I see them interacting as like one is a way to promote, and the other one is like what it is that I really love doing.
I relate to everything you said so much, because I feel very similarly about my TikTok, where I feel like I was just kind of using my TikTok as like a fun thing. And then I was like, I don't know, like I felt like I needed to merge the two in some way, because I'm like, okay, I have this community on Substack and my TikTok is really just like my friends and like larger community. And I'm like, I could use this to be something. And I like you were saying about the baiting people, I almost have like mixed feelings about that, because I hate having to do like a punchline at the beginning to get people to actually care. But that's like the only way the algorithm will, one, push out your content, and to get people to say. And it's a little frustrating because it feels almost unnatural, and sometimes I watch my videos back and I'm like, oh, like it's a little bit cringy, but it's like that's what you have to do to get people to engage, unfortunately, because like you were saying, like ultimately it is about the writing. Like that's what I want to focus on, and eventually I want to go off the grid and only write and not have to be on social media ever.
That's the goal. Yeah.
It's unfortunately, like in the digital age that we live in, like we just have to do TikTok, we have to do social media, we have to promote our work, otherwise nobody will find us, unfortunately, because I don't really know how the Substack algorithm works. It's still something that I'm figuring out. I'm sure you're figuring out as well. So yeah, TikTok is its own beast. It's definitely good, and I feel you on the whole detaching thing, because I'm starting to learn that, because sometimes I'll spend like 20 minutes filming one TikTok and then it's like it'll get 300 views, and then it's like like let that go and like not let it bother me. But it definitely is like, wow, like I worked really hard on this and nobody cared.
It's so hard. Like that TikTok is humbling. TikTok is such a humbling. And then videos that I took 10 seconds on that I thought were like completely stupid then do so well. So it teaches you how to just I think like I saw some random video that was like tips for influencing or whatever, and like he was talking about having to like forfeit your shame, which is something that I've been processing a lot recently, and I think TikTok has taught me a lot about that. And especially someone, I can be so like such a perfectionist, but being able to be like show it messily, and also like showcase. Sometimes it's so much easier for me to be vulnerable in an essay for some reason than to do that on TikTok. But trying to incorporate more of that on there and allowing myself to exist as like a proper open book, because every time I've done that, I've ultimately always been so validated, because this is going back to the thing of like we kind of all have this like shared experience, and then when you give the language to that, you realize that a lot of people do understand you. So I think like I don't know, but I think what the beauty of TikTok is that you kind of get the chance to do that 10 times a day, however many times you post. Like it doesn't have to be a big deal. So I think that that's what's that could be the silver lining, I guess.
Absolutely. And going back to what you were saying about like kind of being vulnerable on the internet, like you write obviously very publicly about feminism and girlhood. Like was that like a gradual thing that you worked towards? Like what was the breaking point where you were like, okay, like I'm going to share this on the internet?
I was learning more about feminism generally over the last few years. It was something that I took to and felt very passionate about like very quickly. And then I started writing on Substack last September, I want to say. And when I started writing, I had no intention of talking about feminism or talking about womanhood or whatever. Like I didn't know what I was going to write. My first essay was called "What Do I Want to Write About?" Like exploring that idea. And when I sat there writing about it, I was really fascinated by this idea of like feminine restlessness, and I was thinking about like the fig tree from Sylvia Plath's book. Is that it? And that metaphor that has paralyzed so many of us, and and I was thinking about like being a woman and being filled with so much energy and so much that I want to say and so much that I feel and that I'm going through and trying to articulate, and like having all of this energy and then not being able to find any of the words. And that's like ultimately what it was about, that I was like, oh, I feel all these things, but then I don't know what to write. I don't know what to say. And I realized ultimately with the first few essays that I wanted to talk about myself. I just wanted to have this kind of like narrative, nonfiction, whatever essay column. That was the goal. But then, because everything I wrote before then, I was always a fiction writer. I was always very focused on that. So this is my first time dabbling in nonfiction, and I just kind of wanted to share, I guess, my stories or things that have happened to me. And I realized I could not talk about myself without talking about womanhood and without talking about femininity, and that it was so integral to who I was. And I think also, like, having spent so much time before I started writing on Substack and learning about feminism, I didn't realize how much feminism was also giving me the language to describe myself and describe my experiences. So even when I was going there, like, that made the most amount of sense, and that was how I had to explain it. So I think like it was not intentional by any means, and then I found myself there, and yeah, I got stuck in it. Yeah.
And has it surprised you how many people have resonated with your work? Because I think you have like 60 something K on TikTok, like 15K on Substack. Like, how has that been for you, like growing such a platform and seeing so many people resonating with you? Was that surprising to you? And how do you feel about that now?
It was completely shocking. I think, like, especially on TikTok, I would say, I think that with writing, it's so hard to make writing viable that I think I went into it very, like, maybe very pessimistically, that I wasn't really expecting sort of anything out of it, because it was like, you know, who's able to do this well in this day and age, or like, you know, really, really feel like people can be invested in what it is you're putting out there. That felt so rare. So I think that it did really shock me, but in a way, like, my expectations were so low that I didn't, when it happened, it was really surprising and really out of the blue, and something that I don't know. Ultimately, I'm happy that I had the expectation I had going into it, because I think then I primed myself to at least be really excited about it. But then I think, like, it was interesting with because I started gaining followers on TikTok when I was talking very explicitly about feminism, and I think that was interesting to me, because I didn't. Like, looking back on it now, I can understand, because I was talking about more this like radical approach to feminism that I do think is kind of not what people really think about when we think about mainstream liberal girl boss whatever feminism. Yeah. And being able to call that out, like, that was kind of, I guess to some people is quite novel, but I think that myself, as I feel like I, in a lot of ways, is very like alienated from the general population. Like, I was homeschooled, and I don't like men, so I think like that like that border of like heterosexuality was like really, really like a divider. So I think that I was always kind of like on the outside looking in on not just womanhood, but just like existing in the world as like a human being. So I think that like there were things that, but I think at that time when I was writing, I didn't understand that was the perspective that I had, because there's some things that I was saying that I felt like, oh, but like, we understand this, like, this is a takeaway that's very clear to all of us. And then I was surprised when people were like, oh, this is new information to me. Like, I was like, oh no, like, we understand that, like, I don't know, like, porn is evil, and that like this is that men having this desire for you to like send a nude on a first date is crazy. Like, but then I realized like people really wanted to like justify the opposite, and that like this was like novel information for some people. But I think that I, as someone who, especially and particularly, hadn't engaged with men virtually at all at that point when I started writing, like, I didn't have this thing within me where I was trying to get them to like me. So I feel like I was able to be more honest. And I thought that we all kind of thought that way. So I don't know. So then when people were gravitating towards it, it was interesting, because it also wasn't what I set out to do. So then it was surprising that that's what people wanted to hear from me. But yeah, no, that was a long-winded way of being like, it was weird. It was weird.
Yeah, I get that. And back to your point about almost like pop feminism,
yeah.
almost, like, I think we're in this like weird age right now where I think people are talking about like now we're almost like in like a fifth wave of feminism almost, where I think there's becoming a divide between people who just like identify with like the more digestible version of feminism versus like true feminism. Like you were saying, like I've always been like, I support sex workers, but I don't support sex work. And that is like such a controversial statement.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, it's grating to them to hear certain like ideals, especially because they haven't heard it before, especially if you are going to like, I don't know, like your standard liberal arts college where they're just giving you like very, I don't want to say basic ideas of feminism, but I think about like the Barbie movie where I didn't watch it in full, but I saw clips and I was like, I thought this is stuff that everybody knew, but realizing that that's not the case. And a lot of people don't really think as critically as you would hope about certain ideals and things that impact us as women. And a lot of people still hold on to a lot of patriarchal ideals. And I do as well. Like I literally just go talking about that, like how I'm honestly trying to figure out, like, because I do date men, unfortunately. Trying to figure out like what is the balance between like not upholding the patriarchy, but also feeling like I still respect myself and then getting the things that I desire, because it's like I don't necessarily want to do like 50-50, but it's also like, what does that mean in the lens of the patriarchy? Because that is, it's like so many things, but I feel like a lot of people don't think that way and they aren't thinking critically about the ways that their life impacts all of these things. And I feel like I'm really starting to think about it. When you say certain things, it comes across as controversial, like a hot take, but I'm like, how are we not all thinking that way?
I was so surprised. But then you realize like, I think especially, I think that the dating men and not dating men piece does become really relevant because it's kind of like who has a vested interest in being able to have men like you. And I think that there's so much shame around that. There's so much shame around, you know, like if you're a girl who likes boys and you want your crush to pay attention to you, like you get called a pick-me. And I'm like, that's insane. Like it's like, and I think that we're talking about like 99% of women are attracted to men, want to have relationships with men, want to be able to like settle down to some extent with a man. If that's your vantage point as a woman, which it is for the vast majority of them, then how do you have these honest conversations with yourself? Like they are very, very difficult. And I think that a lot of women on some level might just avoid it because it's just like, I mean, how do you sit with that knowledge of like, oh, like the people that you desire romantic and like intimate and soft love and connection with have such violent and like abhorrent expectations and desires and have been completely socialized different from you. That's a horrible thing to stomach. And so it makes a lot of sense, I think, why there's that reaction of like, oh, I never thought about that because I never let myself think about it.
You have to go through a grieving process. And I feel like I've spent the past couple years, especially like my mid-20s era, like grieving that and grieving the fact that like men are not what I thought that they were, because like I grew up in a 2-parent household. Like I feel like I had more positive views of men, especially like watching Disney Channel and the fairy tales and all these things, and then like actually getting to know men and meeting men across races and ages and socioeconomic backgrounds and realizing like, oh, like there's actually something deeply wrong that's like in every single one of you, unfortunately, and having to grieve that like, okay, like what I'm looking for is going to look a little bit differently than I expected. And there's a lot of pain and sorrow in that. I feel like I spent a lot of time like being like, ouch, like this fucking sucks, honestly. And I get why a lot of women don't want to think about those things. It's easy to live in that bubble, because I wanted to live in that bubble for so long until it's like in your face and it's like you can't look past that. But I do want to move on to my next question. Just about like your writing process and your creative process. Like, are you writing from theory first, emotion first, or somewhere in between? What does that look like for you?
I've always kind of thought that what I write falls into like 2 different categories, where I have this kind of feminist, social criticism, whatever work, like very direct in that way, and then I have this more like prose, lyrical, sometimes poetic writing that's like usually more emotion based. So I think when I'm writing that latter half, I am starting from that place of a feeling. Often it starts as a title, like I have a line or something that I think would be a good title for it, or like something that I think could come up at some point in the essay, and then I kind of like tease out a essay from that. And often that also starts as usually as poems, and then they turn into essays. But then with my more feminist criticism stuff, it's me being chronically online and just spending like way too much goddamn time on the internet and like being like, oh, okay, we're all talking about Sabrina Carpenter, we're talking about Chaperone, or we're talking about Taylor Swift, or we're talking about who's another girl everyone got mad at, City Sweetie. Like we're talking about whatever woman that there's like a feminist criticism that could be made of her. I'm like, okay, cool. Like we're having this discussion, or we're talking about that like alpha male morning routine video that like went viral. And so I'm kind of noticing whatever had like conversations being had and like the zeitgeist, and then deciding to write whatever my perspective or my contribution to that conversation is. And so it starts from just like an obscenely high TikTok screen time, and then turns into an essay. Mm-hmm.
Actually, I get that. Do you find that there are certain patterns or wounds or questions you keep circling back to in your work?
Jesus, yeah, that's like the whole grudge with it, is that like talking about womanhood, is that like I can't get over like the same, you know, set of problems or the same set of like themes. And I think that that's what's so like debilitating about being a woman existing under like patriarchy, is that it feels like you can't get past these themes. Like your body is just so important, and how big or small it is, how pretty or not it is, how desirable it is. It feels so connected to our sense of self, to our sense of safety, to our ability to feel like we can build like beautiful and like lives for ourselves, that we can be loved by people, and that, and then like experiences with like men, experiences generally like with romance, experiences with sex, experiences with like these different themes. It's a small amount. I think it ultimately all centers down to the body, whether it's like the body, your relationship with the body and how it looks, or your relationship with the body in relation to other people's bodies, whether that's like through dating or intimacy or whatever. It's like I can't get past those things. And it's like, I don't know, I wrote an essay, it was I became a woman, then nothing else ever again. And I was kind of exploring that idea a little bit in it, about like, God damn it, like I can't sit down and write an essay and talk about what I feel without talking about my goddamn body again. Like it's like I can't progress past this point. So it's like 100% a theme that like angers me as much as it would anger anyone else. But I'm like, I would love to like exist beyond this, but we don't like let women be anything else.
And how do you feel about people close to you, like friends, family, people you're dating, like engaging with your essays and your videos?
That was so funny. I was looking at that question and I was like, everyone I know all of my family members have never read anything, and I've told them I don't want them to read anything, because I'm like, if I know you're watching me, then I can't be honest. But the one date I've ever gone on with a man was someone who had read my work. And so it was really interesting it was the first time I've ever spoken to someone who I've met outside of writing, like we met at school, who like knew my writing. And that was the first time like I ever engaged with someone in that way. And then on top of that, for that to be a man, and to be someone I was like, you know, potentially going to be romantically engaging with, it was like, it was all of these like themes compounding, where I was like, oh, he's definitely going to have like a certain expectation of the way that I operate and the way that I think. And so feeling like, you know, in some ways I was grateful, because I felt like it painted a good picture of like, this is how I feel, and like, this is how I'm going to like bring up certain things. But then it was also, there was an added pressure in the just particular context of that situation, that I was like, it was the first time that I had to feel the patriarchy programming coming out of me in a relationship with like talking to a man, because I don't like ever get engaged with men really, like outside of this experience. Like I was like, I don't have like male friends, hadn't like gone on a date, hadn't like dealt with men in like really any other domain. So it was like the first time that I was like, oh, I have to like be a woman around a man, and it's also a man that like knows that this is really important to me. But it was a hard to, there was so many times where he's like, I never thought you would say something like that, like I never thought that you would, like that this is kind of surprising to hear from you, because it was like, oh, because I'm like realizing like the desire to be like palatable and to be found desirable by you and to be validated and liked was so strong that like, yeah, even though I know that I talk about this online, it's really hard to do it in person. It's really hard to like turn my back on all of this programming. So it was a really interesting experience to navigate that I've actually never written about, that I should at some point, but yeah.
Yeah, definitely on the part about men reading your writing. I feel like I've had, unfortunately, too many experiences with that, especially because I do think I talk a little bit more about dating and love in some of my experiences. So I find that men project themselves onto your work a lot, and it's uncomfortable because, one, it's not about you. Like, quite literally, it's not about you, but also like like my writing is not about you. It's not for you. Like you
Yeah.
obviously can read it and engage with it, but it's not about you. And I think that oftentimes men center themselves in that. And with like you were saying, you try to make yourself palatable, where I've written about certain things that are a little bit more vulnerable and deep, where it's like I find myself almost watering it down to be like, no, like it wasn't that deep, or like whatever. It's like, no, it was that deep because I wrote a whole essay about it. Like it bothered me, or it felt a certain way. It's definitely hard. And going back to family and friends, like I think my friends have been reading it a little bit more, which is like a little, I don't know, mixed feelings about that, because it's like, I'm glad that you're being supportive, but it's also like I wasn't like necessarily like ready to like share certain things with you, and now you know those things, and it's not a bad thing because that builds intimacy with your friends. But it's like I was never gonna sit down and have a conversation with you about this thing that I went through. That was really just like me pouring my thoughts out. And with family, especially because we're both African, like I don't want my family to read my stuff, like quite literally ever.
I would do anything. Like I would avoid it.
Yeah, no, that is like my worst nightmare, because on top of the fact that I write about like dating and love and stuff, I also talk about like not being religious anymore and deconstructing. And coming from a very religious African family, like not that my parents are like a little bit more on the progressive side relatively. Again, they're still very like strict African parents. I think it'd be like, oh, so that's what you think?
Yeah.
There's a level of like weirdness with that. And I can imagine even more so with you writing about feminism and like African culture upholding so much of the patriarchy and focus on marriage and men and all these things. Like, I mean, do they know what you write about? Like, do they understand the content of what you write about? Like, how do they feel about that?
My parents know that it's about feminism, and they know that it's about like women empowerment, I guess. But like I think to them, they think that I'm just on there being like, you go girl, slay the patriarchy. Like I feel like that's
like, okay, that's good.
Like they can get down with that. So I think they definitely don't know like the extent to which I mean I remember I spoke at this I was actually just in DC. That was my first time going to DC in July. And I spoke at this World Without Exploitation Youth Summit. And I was talking about, we were talking about digital prostitution and like the sex trade happening online. And so I gave a speech about like the digitalization of prostitution. And I was talking about being it from like this anti-stance of like being anti-porn and like anti the sex trade and whatever. And I was particularly nervous because obviously my parents were really excited for me to go do that. So I was like, oh, they're going to hear me give this whole essay about like, or this whole speech about like, because a lot of that essay or a lot of that speech I talk about like porn, like children's porn usage and the fact that like we were growing up like in my middle school, like growing up around other like tween boys that were already watching like hardcore pornography and the way that was treating us. And so I was like, you're gonna hear like a lot of like really intense things, mom, about like the things that I grew up with. But like surprisingly, she really took well to that conversation. And I think that especially since the older generation tends to also have these stances against the sex trade, but for like very different reasons. So I think she was happy that that was what I thought. But like I was like, if we got into the nitty gritty of it, like we would stop seeing eye to eye.
Oh, absolutely.
So, yeah. I just try to make them know as little as possible.
Yeah, of course. Do you ever feel like your vulnerability online sets up any expectations for constantly sharing? Like, how do you kind of draw the line between how much you share and like how much of your own personal experiences do you blend into your work? Because I know you talked about that, the talk that you had where you're talking about like being in middle school and like how that impacted you. Like, how much of your personal experiences do you blend into your work, especially like on TikTok, where I feel like people expect you to be like constantly there, constantly sharing, like saying so much of your life. Like, how do you draw that line?
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely say the pressure to share is more like self-originating than anything that I've gotten from like my audience. Like I've never felt like anyone has, I don't know, like asked me something that I might have deemed as invasive or uncomfortable. But I'm also such an open book that I don't know if I would like register something as being invasive, even if it was. But I'm at I think a good point in the size of my audience that for the most part, like if I don't want to talk about something, I just don't bring it up, and then it doesn't become a problem. Where I think like once you have like millions of followers, then I think that stops being something that's like available to you. But great, like I'm grateful to be in like the position that I'm in right now, where there isn't that like magnifying glass on any of like my personal life details. So a lot of what I usually the things I decide not to talk about are mostly because they involve other people, and like involve like my family members, and like not wanting, I guess, to I don't know, shed any like bad light on those people or people who did not decide that they wanted their information online. So it's like most of the time those are the things that I won't talk about. Or I I don't know. It's a lot of people that I've ever, like, if I've ever engaged with someone romantically, a lot of the time I'm like, I don't want to talk about them online either. Because I'm like, it's the whole thing of like, are you gonna read this and be like, this is not me, and you're just obsessed with
Right.
me. So I'm just like, I'm not gonna give anyone the ability to have that thought process. So I'm like, if I'm gonna talk about love, I'm gonna talk about like very generally. But yeah, I think like, but a lot of like virtually, I should probably have more boundaries with the internet because I really do share a lot. Like, there's a lot of things that I'm very like open about, but I think like I don't know what else I would talk about. Like, I'm all I know, you know?
Yeah, that's so real, because it's like I feel like I'm finding that as well, where it's like I do want to just say so much, and I'm like, knowing how the internet works and being on the internet since I was like, I don't know, like 12 years old, like growing up in the internet, I know that people will investigate every little thing that you've ever said. So I'm like, if I share something on the internet, I know that like obviously like I'm not obligated to follow up with stuff, but it's almost like the internet feels like a sense of entitlement where it's like, well, you brought this to us, so like what happened with that? That's going back to like the whole dating thing. I don't really necessarily want to share too many details about my dating life, because then like thinking about like even like influencers or celebrities, like when they're in very public relationships and they end, people are like, well, you brought them to us, so like what happened? Why'd you break up? Did he cheat on you? Like what happened? And I don't want that to happen with any aspect of my life, dating, friendships, parents, like anything like that. But it's kind of hard because it's like we are all we know. So it's like what is that line, and what should I share so that people can relate to me and understand me and like see that like we see the world similarly, while also maintaining those boundaries. Like it's definitely like a weird line to grapple, and I'm trying to be very intentional and careful with what I say and what I do. But I hate that it feels like you're almost like censoring yourself and like having to like hold back a little bit. So it's weird.
Absolutely. It's especially like you're saying, growing up in this stage of the internet where everyone is like, there is this magnifying glass and there is this like, you know, I mean, freaking, this happened with Love Island, that we got like 2 different people were taking off Love Island because of things that they said in the past. It's like every single thing that you've ever put out there is going to be like gone through with a fine-tooth comb. And like that situation was different because we were talking about like bigotry, but just using that as an example of like people, like everything you put out there is forever, and people are going to find it. So it's like there is, it prevents, I think in other contexts, the capacity for growth and the capacity to change, and that like essays I wrote 3 months ago may not be applicable to me anymore, and I would like for that to be something that people can respect. So you know, it's really hard. I think like my approach is I'm just gonna like put it out there, and that's also why like ultimately I'm like, I am, as I've mentioned, really bad with the response and being able to like take back in everything that I'm getting back from people. And I think that the hard part is that like I don't want to feel like, oh, people really liked me for this one thing, or they really gravitated towards this one thing, and then now I'm stuck in that space, and then I'm not allowed to now exist outside of that. So I don't know. My approach right now is just, but I'm gonna put it all out there, and then I'm gonna close my computer and I'm gonna walk away.
No, I need to learn that, because it's so hard to not niche yourself down, because I think a lot of people, for me, like resonate a lot with like my deconstructing, like leaving Christianity thing, and I'm like, that is like obviously like a part of me, but that's not all of me, and I don't want to just be that. So it's definitely hard to like, I'm trying to form a level of detachment, because I am definitely someone that struggles a little bit with detachment in like every area of my life. So I'm like really trying to focus on that. But going back to your responses from your audience, like what has that been like? Have they been mostly affirming? Have they been critical? Especially because you are talking about like feminism and the patriarchy, like both like from women and from men. How has that been like?
Thankfully, I have a mostly female audience from what I've gathered. So I haven't dealt with a lot of like this idea of like your video gets the wrong side of TikTok, so then you're just like being attacked in the comment section. Like that's happened a few times, but nothing that's been like significant by any means. I find, if anything, I don't know, the men, it's like I say stuff knowing they're not going to like it. So I don't like, I never have this expectation that, you know, they were going to comment anything nice in the first place. So it's like that never really been what's bothering me. It's like when I talk about, especially when I talk about the sex trade and I talk about being like anti like OF or generally this like buying and selling of sex, that, and then I'll like have women that'll be like, you are anti-women, like you are anti feminism, like this is literally like just this like conservative, you're like a Republican take. And I think like those are really, really hard things to hear when it is like I'm saying everything because of my love for women. Like that's where all of this is coming from. I think that that's been like a harder response to receive. But I think generally when it comes to my writing, I've gotten a lot of affirmation and a lot of like generally very positive responses. And I think like I love when people can take it and kind of be able to talk about their own experiences and their own narrative, and the way that, you know, something that I wrote can now give them more language for themselves. I always feel like the nicest thing anyone can say to me in response to something I've written is that they understand me and they feel understood. And I think that that's as women, I mean, as women myself, that's all I'm ever looking for is to like be believed. And it's just like, it's a whole other project I'm working on now. But just like, I think like that's always what I'm in pursuit of, is like, I don't need you to love me. I don't need you to accept me. I don't need you to care about me, but just believe me. And I think that's something that we're so robbed of. So I think that whenever we can feel like, oh, we believe each other, we understand each other, that's like so validating, that's so validating, so for me to be. And thankfully, I feel like I've gotten that response a good amount.
Building off of that, like with watching your Substack and your TikTok grow, like how has that shifted the way that you see yourself and see your work?
Ooh, oh, it's I can't think about it that hard at all. I remember when I went to the DC event, I posted about it a bit before, and then someone who had followed me was like, "Oh, I saw you posted about it," and then I came. You know, I was like really excited and whatever, like wanted us to chat and wanted to see the summit, and I was like, it was so like, it was the first time I ever met someone who followed me online. So it was the most disorienting experience I'd had in my entire life, and I was so like immensely grateful and like this is incredible. Like I was like just over the moon to be able to like have this discussion, but I was also like, I never thought I was going to be the kind of person where someone would be like, I've seen, oh my god, I saw you online, I saw your videos, like this is so I was looking forward to being able to see you here. I was like, what are you talking about? Like I just always feel like I'm shouting into the void, and I'm like, oh, there's someone out there that's like receiving something I'm saying. Like that's so it's so shocking to me. So I think like as it's grown, I've had to think about myself less, because if I think about myself in the context of, you know, the fact that people might like be aware of my existence and like, I don't know, like have whatever response or whatever relationship or parasocial like thought that they might have about me, that's very like disorienting. So I can't stay in that mind frame for long. But I think thinking about the way it's impacted my writing, I think the hardest part is the niching and is the feeling of people like me for this one thing, and now I can never be anything different. And like what you were saying about people mostly know you for your deconstructing content, and then, you know, feeling like you're pigeonholed in that, like that has been like my exact experience. And I took a sabbatical, was that last month? I didn't post anything, and it was because I was like, I don't know if I just want to be this kind of like cultural critic like right now, just kind of be like just that, and like feel like I can't, you know, put as much as of myself and my own like personal experiences into the writing, because like people just want to be like, so Sabrina Carpenter, like I'm like, okay, like can we broaden it up a little bit, like can we talk about, you know, something else? So yeah, it's so hard, especially since I think a lot of the way I've written, unfortunately, has like pedestaled myself as being like at the finish line. Especially like my best essay is Being Ugly Will Set You Free, and I was very much talking about like beauty standards and self-acceptance and whatever, and was talking about it from this perspective of like, give up the pursuit of beauty, like it doesn't matter, just accept yourself and whatever, and was like in a space in my life when I posted that I very much felt every single word, but I've like am not in that space anymore at all. So I think it's hard, and I think that's the hardest part with the writing, is that like, oh, that's what people want from me, that's what people expect from me, and like, do I need to continue to perform that role, you know, if that's all that people want to hear from me? So that's definitely the hardest part by any means, but for the most part.
That kind of leads me to my next question about like just like what's been the most challenging with like sustaining like a very feminist public facing practice, with obviously like evolving ideals, because again, like we're in our 20s, like we are still figuring things out, we're figuring ourselves out, like things that we thought like even like a month ago we're going to be different from what we think today. So like how do you go about handling that, and like what's challenging about being in that space, especially so publicly?
The hardest part, I would say, is well, definitely navigating a conflict. I think I like posted a video about City Sweetie, and it hadn't been up for very long, and then there was a lot of like hate comments, and then I was like, oh, did I misinterpret the situation? Did I kind of give the wrong take on it? And I kind of took it down and was like, okay, let me like think more about whatever the situation at hand was. And I think that like I think that could be hard in the always looking at like, do I have the right stance? Do I have the right opinion? Do I have like, am I saying what people not only want to hear from me, but also like, I don't know, am I saying something enriching and something correct, something that people aren't going to want to cancel me for or whatever? Like that thought is always there. And then yeah, and then like, kind of like the whole pigeonholing of feeling like this is all that people want to have from me. Yeah, I'm trying to think of like what is the hardest part. And I would say so. And then yeah, as I've changed and as I've evolved, especially this year, in that like my having so many experiences in my personal life that have made me have to like deconstruct and confront these themes that I talk about a lot, about beauty and desirability and being, you know, palatable and acceptable to men, to the masses, to the people in general. and my relationship with myself changing a lot, and like not being the like body positive, confident feminist that I was like 6 months ago, and like being like, well, what do I do now? Like, do I tell people that, or are they gonna want to hear that from me? Like, that's been really tough.
Yeah, and back to your point about almost feeling like you don't know if you're making the right takes or if people are disagreeing with you. I have been struggling with that so much because this is like such a, not a small thing, but kind of a thing. I had made an essay talking about Sid Karmi and kind of like the swirling epidemic, in my opinion, and I made a TikTok about it. And it was primarily like 16 to 18-year-olds like eating me up in the comments, but I was like, oh my God, like I had a lot of people like very upset because they were just like, how dare you say that? And I was like, do I take this video down? Like clearly if like I'm kind of outnumbered and the like maybe I'm in the wrong somehow. And it's definitely interesting trying to navigate like it's almost like standing firm in like whatever you think and not letting the internet kind of run you over, but it is uncomfortable at the same time because it's like you do want to provide room to be like, okay, maybe I am wrong about certain things, because you don't want to be the person that's like, no, I'm right, and everybody's telling you you're wrong and you just don't see it. So it's definitely like a weird place to be in, especially being in like the more like writer intellectual space, because you're sharing your thoughts based off of your experiences and like your study and like whatever it is, like you're ideally supposed to be coming from a more informed space. So when you share something people don't like it, it's like maybe I'm not as informed as I thought I was, and that's because it makes you feel dumb and stupid and like all these things. So it's like it's a lot of like honestly a little bit of ego death constantly.
It is. It's the weird. It's your ego being completely boosted and then like torn apart by the next video. Because I can have a comment of someone being like, "You never miss. You got it, queen. Like perfect take, whatever." And then the next one, it's like, "You're the dumbest person alive. I don't know how we got here." So it's like you got to be like, "Okay, I guess the truth is somewhere in the middle." But it's so weird to navigate.
Yeah, definitely weird. So now moving forward, where do you see your work evolving?
Ooh, I mean, now that I'm incorporating more of my narrative work and not putting the focus so much on whatever, I was like, keep going back to Sabrina Carpenter for some reason. I don't know why I'm really invoking that woman's name a lot today.
Mine for everyone right now, honestly.
She's like not just talking about Sabrina Carpenter, which is also hilarious because my paid essay going up today is about Sabrina Carpenter. But I think trying to get away from that space where I am just focusing so much on this, like, you know, I'm just gonna be this feminist critic and just only ever like occupy that room, and allowing like whatever more like creative and fun and like things that feel very expansive and very exciting to me. And it's terrifying and something that like I basically took my month-long hiatus just trying to like hype myself up to like come back to be a bit of a different writer. And knowing that like I think that yesterday's essay was not like feminist in nature really at all, and like that was the first time that I've posted something like that since being like feminist writer TM, you know. So I that was really like disorienting. But what I'm just hoping to get more comfortable with that and more like used to it, and hopefully like just gauge whatever response comes from that. So yeah, that's what I'm focusing on, and that's where I'm putting a lot of my energy into, and like expanding and like allowing people to be like a part of that journey, and not assuming, kind of not making decisions for people for how I think they're going to respond to me, but actually giving them the chance to tell me. So that's where I'm at right now.
Oh, I love that. And I'm very excited to see what you do with your work. I'll obviously be following along. I have been, and I'm excited to see where things go. For my final question, if you could tell your younger creative self one thing, what would it be?
Oh my gosh. If I could tell my younger creative self one thing, what would it be? I definitely think that when it comes to writing, it's a quantity over quality thing. And I think that it's the fastest way to get over like perfectionism. It's the fastest way to get over whatever like mental blocks there might be around like I need to be really good and I need people to really like me or whatever, is to just like, because then that would stop me from writing so often. So I'm like, you would rather write the shittiest poem, the shittiest essay, the shittiest whatever, like you know, every day, once a week, whatever, and just like have the material and then like be able to see your evolution, because it'll happen like regardless of if you want it or not. And I think I would have been able to evolve as a writer sooner if I just like opened the goddamn laptop and just start putting something down on paper and not like just thinking about it and thinking about how do I do it perfectly before I start. So I think that's the biggest piece I would give, is just write a lot and don't worry about it being good.
I love that. Thank you so much, Paris. I'm so glad I got to have you on the Table. I'll make sure I link all of your socials and the
Thank you.
comments. And thank you again for joining.
I am so happy to have been here. Thank you so much for having me.